Very cool. So I only have, I have lots of questions, of course, as you know me already. I mean, we know each other pretty well. So I'm just going to ask you just a couple of those.
Sure.
So with proliferation of complex widgets on the web, like tab panels, carousels, sliders, anything and everything people put on the web right now to make web look like a desktop, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think should happen to keyboard? Because I think there is obviously a discussion going on, especially in the accessibility community, is how do you make the user who is using the web understand that, hey, even though they're on the web, they're not on the web, they know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit difficult when you have these apps that are kind of amalgams that are mixing web-style things and desktop-style things. Mm-hmm. I think it's a little bit easier when you look at an app like Yahoo Mail, for example, which was based primarily on a desktop convention of how Outlook worked. And I think in that context, you more expect those controls to act like they do on the desktop than you would on like Gmail, for instance. So if I had the same controls in Gmail, I might be a little bit more confused about it. So I think it's really about having a more cohesive design strategy around your web app and trying not to mix up the paradigms. Because I think that people are getting savvy enough to understand the difference between a web interface and a desktop interface, but there has to be a cue, right? And the cue visually is like, oh, this actually looks like a desktop app. Whereas I think, would you say that the cue for you would be more an ARIA role saying, right, hey, this thing is a tab panel, or this thing is a menu of some sort?
Yeah, so I mostly was referring to you as a person who doesn't hear any cues, but you just look at the screen, and somebody puts in front of you this vertical tab. And for those of you guys who are not heavy keyboard users, for example, on a desktop, when you have to interact with the tab panel, you will be using left and right arrow keys to move between tabs, right? So such as settings dialog.
Right.
And so for longest time, you remember we had on Yahoo Search, we had the tab panel, which is like a vertical set of categories, right? And with the mouse, you just click on a tab you want to pick. And we decided to use left and right arrow keys. So those are the kind of situations I was really curious what you thought of.
Yeah, those situations end up confusing for me because there's no visual indicator that this thing is acting like a desktop control. Cool. Because to me, when I see, like on those tabs for Yahoo Search, what I would see is 4 links horizontally, one next to the other. And so the way that I would interact with that normally is press tab, expect to go to the first one, press tab, expect to go to the second one, and keep going. Except in the paradigm of the desktop, that's not how it works, obviously. Mm-hmm. You press tab, and you go into the contents of the tab panel, and then use left and right to move back and forth.
Cool.
So without a visual indicator to know that I should be doing something different, that gets a little confusing.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm happy to hear that answer, because I think one of the things about keyboard access is really, it's not enough just to have shortcut keys, but it's also making sure that the user understands that the shortcut keys are there. And also, what is the general, so probably even having a keyboard help page would be great, kind of like question mark key, right? But when you open it up, it sort of explains to the keyboard shortcuts are available, and here's how you use them.
Yep.
Cool. I just thought, what you thought about it. So there's another thing interesting. You talk to oftentimes to people, it's like, we're going to make this page keyboard accessible. And of course, developers, being very creative people, they start thinking, oh, maybe there's a way I can do something with my content. How about if I push my content up in the DOM so that the user doesn't have to tab as much? What would you say to such a developer?
Yeah, I would say generally a good idea. One of my least favorite things, before I discovered the keyboard shortcuts on Gmail, I felt really sad because they have so much navigation before you actually get to the mail messages themselves. I felt like I was pressing tab 100 times, or just like holding it down and going and getting coffee, and then coming back and hoping that the tab would be close to where I wanted it to be when I came back.
You could write a script that would tab for you, right?
That's true. I could write a script that would tab for me. No, it's, generally I think that the important navigation should be at the top, but then you should get to the content as quickly as possible. And you can always do interesting things, like have drop-down menus that let you have more, or have menus at other spots on the page. But for the most part, like when I go to a site, I want to be able to get to the thing that I'm there to do. So if I'm going to Gmail, I want to be able to read my mail, and I want to be able to read my mail fast. And if I'm on Twitter, I want to be able to read the tweets that I got or send out a tweet, and I want to be able to do that quickly. And so the fewer barriers that I have between me when I first get there and the action that I want to do, the happier I'm going to be.
Cool. Well, same here. Yeah, I get totally get the pain, and it's actually very interesting because just today we brought, I'm not going to name this company because we have a live stream, so it wouldn't be fair.
And because I named enough companies already?
No, well, maybe. Yeah, so they have come up with some very interesting keyboard shortcut keys that, let's just say they're not using any control key or anything that you would think of as a standard modifier key. So I know we sort of alluded to this a little bit, like try to be as clear to the user or as don't make me think kind of approach, right?
Yep.
So I guess you would probably say to them the same thing, right? Don't overdo it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the modifier keys, I think, can get a little confusing because you can end up colliding with something that the browser or the operating system is doing completely accidentally. And so I love the paradigm that like Gmail and Twitter and those folks have been doing where things are basically just key combinations while you have focus on specific items. Yep. And being able to just press R to reply to something I think is really cool. And being able to just say G and then I to go back to the inbox. It's like really nice, and you don't have to worry about doing any hand contortions for, your weird modifier keys.
And in personal observation, I've seen also some very interesting patterns where people would put as a title, they would insert Windows shortcut keys that are based on Windows browser. So like it would say in the title, it would say Control-Alt-R, but you're on the Mac. And so you're like, yeah.
So that means that they want you to go and buy a PC and
probably, yeah. Or somebody was trying to be very helpful, obviously, right? But they forgot that not everybody's using Windows.
Right.
I guess, there's always this, it's in some ways the dumbest question you can ask, but it's the question that you have to ask, right?
Is it the dumbest question you can ask?
You have to ask the dumbest question.
Okay.
Otherwise, what a conversation if you don't have a dumb question.
It's true.
It's just too smart a conversation to have. Anyway, so the question is, so we talked about spatial navigation. I think I totally agree. When I tried it in Opera, I really liked the whole idea. In fact, even I would say I like it better than what screen readers currently offer you. I'm not going to go into details, but I think there are some interesting things about spatial navigation that you can do. And we know that most browsers miss that feature, right? I mean, now that Opera is moving to WebKit, I don't know if they're going to bring that feature set, for example.
I put in a request for that.
Okay. And then Firefox has this thing, cursor, if you press F7.
Yeah, the cursor navigation.
Cursor navigation, sort of like that, right? Kind of similar.
Yeah, well, the cursor navigation, though, works more like a word processor.
Right.
So you can move character by character and then line by line and paragraph by paragraph.
And so the question is, so what is the next big thing that you miss in the browser as far as the keyboard access is concerned? What would you like every browser to have?
Yeah, so I think that the experience that I miss the most as a keyboard user is that random access to whatever link is on the page. Because when you're using a mouse, like you see something over on the right and you just move your mouse over to the right and you click on it. Right? You don't have to like move your mouse around all of these other links first and then go to there. So I would love some way to actually just be able to say, hey, I want to activate that link and just do it. And I actually, this past week, a colleague was just telling me about an extension that I didn't have time to look up and then forgot the name of, where you could actually press like comma, and then it would pop up little key codes on every link on the page. And then you could use that key code to just activate that link. And I think for me, that's like the ultimate next feature for keyboard navigation is just being able to, with 2 keystrokes, click on any link that's on a page that I can see pretty much.
Cool. There's an interesting question from Twitter, actually. I was about to wrap up, yeah. There was. And it wasn't about your email, by the way.
No, I assume that I assume a question about my email will be sent to my email.
No. Anyway, so the question is, so the person actually is asking, can we make our mobile website accessible? And I think what they're trying to ask is that how is that whole discussion of keyboard access relevant to mobile web? And I'm not talking about native apps at this point, obviously. I'm just talking about mobile websites. What would you say?
Well, I think that a lot of the same rules apply, except, of course, for keyboard shortcuts. That would be a little bit hard to do on a mobile device. But you still want to think about hover a lot, even more so than you do on the desktop, right? This is, of course, the case where you're using the same site for both desktop and mobile. Maybe you're doing some responsive something or other. That when you hide stuff on hover, you're going to be a little bit stuck on mobile devices. Now, iOS does some really wacky stuff to try to make sure that you don't lose hover. So if there's hover, a colon hover on something on iOS, and you tap on it, the first thing it will do is it will trigger that hover state so that you can see whatever it was. So if you've ever been using an iPad or an iPhone or something like that, and you tapped on a link once, and it didn't seem to do anything, but it became underlined, and then you tapped on it again, that's because the first tap was triggering the hover, and then the second tap was actually triggering the click. And so that's something to watch out for, because the hover isn't really adding any value. It's actually getting in the way of what you're trying to do. So removing those hovers for your mobile website is usually a really good idea. And the second thing is to think about focus, like where is focus going on the page? So are you, when you're, especially, I find it really frustrating to interact with forms on mobile websites because people do really wacky things with focus in forms. And I don't understand why. So you guys might have experienced this. I seem to find these forms all the time because I was born under like a bad sign or something, where I get into these forms where like they want you to fill out something like your phone number, and it's 3 boxes instead of 1 box. And like you type in 3 numbers into the first one, and then it shifts focus to the next one. Right? And you type in 3 numbers in the next one, and it shifts focus to the next one. And they think that they're being really helpful, but they're actually being really annoying. And on mobile devices, that can sometimes cause the virtual keyboard to go away. Because when you set focus, the keyboard goes away so that you can see where focus is set. And then you have to bring the keyboard back up. And that just drives me absolutely batty. So and those 2 things, I think, are common themes, just managing your focus appropriately and dealing with hover appropriately, whether it's on mobile or if it's on desktop. I don't